Hi there, I'm Kira and thanks very much for joining me. Today's card is the number 13 Major Arcana and it is the Death card. I'm using the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, and as with the other cards I've done, I like to remind people that everything on the card has significance. So pause the video for a moment and have a really good close look at this card. What jumps out at you? What thoughts and feelings? What do you feel about the word death? Come back when you've had a chance to sort of take some time out for yourself. Okay, so the Death card. Well, as I said, death. You know, most people get this in a reading and they immediately fear it. They think the worst. They perhaps have had a difficult death in their life. The loss of a loved one may come up. So it's always good to acknowledge that. But when this card actually appears in a reading for myself, I really like to focus on the fact that death is about transformation, and transformation can be a very positive situation, and it definitely can be one where it's about the renewal, and that's a good thing. You know, that which isn't changing and growing is dying. What happens when things die? Things grow. So things grow, things develop, things renew. So it's about the transformation. So let's have a look at this card in detail. So first of all, yes, we've got the figure here, a black figure, a sort of a skeleton figure on a white horse, which is death. This is the representation in this card of death, and it's arriving on a white horse, and it's quite dominant in the card. You know, it's a large figure, so it's not something that you can deny. You know, just like you're not going to deny death. Death is a reality of life, and you're also not going to deny taxes, for example. All right, what else have we got here? Well, you know, death here is this figure of death as it arrives is carrying a black and white flag, and inside this is a white rose. All right, and we've also got here, we've definitely got somebody who has the imagery of somebody who has died, and this actually in the tarot deck is the Emperor. We'll get to that in a minute, the significance, and the Emperor has lost his crown. We've also got, you know, we've got a young person, and probably when the card was designed as a sort of a maiden type person, a young person who's looking away from death, doesn't want to acknowledge death. And I think that's a fairly common response in life. People often perhaps go into a state of denial around death, your own death, you know, and or death of someone else. So, you know, it's acknowledging that as human beings, denial is often present when we discuss death. We've also got a young person, a younger person here who's carrying, I think, a rose, and they're actually embracing death, partly because they may not really realize the significance of death, but also in this card, I think it's sort of signifying that, you know, we can embrace death. It's around being amazed and have the amazement and the wonder of, oh, wow, you know, what is coming? What is this change or this transformation that's about to occur? We also have sort of a person here in yellow, a figure. I think in the tarot deck, to me, this is the Hierophant. But, you know, some people kind of see that perhaps as representing a bishop or a priest of some sort. And even though this person has, you know, quite a lot of stature, power in the community, they are quite small to the reality and the significance of death and transformation. But, you know, they're there to greet death. So it's sort of like our spirituality is the part that carries on when our being sort of goes through this transformative phase. We've also got the sun rising in the background between two pillars, and we've seen these pillars before. They're quite significant in tarot, and you'll see them again. They're going to come up in the moon card, for example. But you might notice there that it's just coming up on the horizon. So it's sort of like signifying that, you know, this new awakening of our awareness and consciousness sort of coming up, you know, and rising up into the reality of what's going on. Okay, you might also notice, you know, I think this white rose represents, you know, sort of purity, purification. Some people say immortality. I think it also represents the same as what death is, that sort of the previous life force has been drained out of this rose, so the color's been drained out, and now it's ready for this renewal, for this new energy. Black also in the tarot often represents the unconscious. So again, this card is indicating the importance of the unconscious, the transformation coming forward into the present. You know, it's sort of that moving of the unconscious into the conscious. So this card is about change, so it's about change and transformation. Unlike the card we've done before, which is the Wheel of Fortune, which was sort of like universal change, or the changes of the seasons or something like that. This card does represent personal change, but it doesn't need to necessarily be change that is a problem for us or cause us distress. Although if we don't embrace change, you will feel pain and suffering. So it's about embracing change. But for example, some of the change, you know, so it can represent, you know, getting a divorce, you know, because it's about change of your identity, change of the symbolism of how you perceive yourself in the world, how others perceive you in the world. So when you have a divorce, you're no longer a married couple, so therefore that is that part of that change. You know, there's that difference. Or when you become a parent, you're no longer single. So, you know, your position in the world, how you perceive yourself has changed. And so that's a part of what the Death card might represent. It's also marriage, for example, because you aren't single. Now you're a married person, you are a couple. So same, you know, divorce and marriage are both sort of symbolisms of the Death card. You know, retirement's another one. You know, your daily routine changes when you retire, and you don't identify any longer as having that particular career. You know, you no longer say, well, I am an osteopath anymore, or I'm no longer an accountant or a lawyer. You don't think like that when you retire. You know, so it's about acknowledging the importance of change and that transformation, and particularly of the ego and the ego identification. So that's what this is talking about. Death here is your ego transforming and change, and with that comes how you perceive yourself and others perceive you in the world. You know, it's a very much, though, it's an organic change like the Wheel of Life card. It's inevitable. You're not going to avoid death. Everyone kind of knows that one. And so that's an important part of this card as well. You know, it's definitely saying this change and transformation is coming. So embracing it is what's going to flower into the renewal phase versus the pain and suffering if you try and avoid it, because you won't avoid it. And as I said, you've got the spirit here of the Hierophant coming to greet you and give guidance and honor, give honor to this process that is an important part of life. There's also, you could say here that, you know, of all elements, there's only really one symbol of showing someone that's been knocked out, and that's the Emperor. And that is because the Emperor is about structure and form, and is somewhat kind of rigid in that sense, and doesn't really embrace change. So if you don't embrace the change, you know, you're definitely going to get knocked by it. So that lack, if there's a lack of inflexibility to the process, then the process will bring about more pain and suffering. So death is sort of a pivotal still point in the process of going from what has been to what will be. So that transformation period, a bit like the solstice, the winter solstice, is that pause before the light returns. But, you know, right the next day when the sun comes up, the daylight is a little bit longer. So immediately, this is not it's not like you hang out for an extended period of time in this place of transformation. It's about the change. A part of change is that there's this constant evolution forward. You know, the sun is rising in the background between the pillars. So this is a very rich place, you know, and as I said, it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad place, you know, and I think if you're reading for someone else, you know, really acknowledge that, remind them that death is an important part of how we grow and develop, and to embrace that. You know, some of the other things I like to think about when I look at this imagery, is that although, you know, like that's sort of reminding us, although the sun sort of dies away every night or appears to, it always rises the next day, and that's why that sun is sitting there. You know, there's also the boat you might notice in the background here, which is sort of symbolism of that which is our higher self, our spirit or our soul or whatever you might take it to mean, is moving, is being taken forward. It goes with us. You know, we take our richness with us. You know, we take all that we've learnt from our prior experiences through this transformation, and we carry that forward. And we let go of everything we don't need, you know, which is why it's the skeleton image here. You know, what we don't need does not need to come with us, and it won't come with us. So it's sort of like, just when I see this card, I like to remind people to sort of relax and accept that this is a very fruitful and positive card if we embrace it with an openness and a flexibility to the transformation process. You know, it's a symbol of that ending of a major phase in your life, which therefore brings about opportunity for something new. You know, it might be that you're putting behind or putting past you something that maybe has been troubling you, or a difficulty. It's about opening to the new possibilities. And sometimes those things that are great to let go of, you know, it's that renewal and transformation might mean that finally you get to let go of some of that suffering and pain of a particular situation that has been around you. You know, and through that transformation, you know, you have the awe of all things that are new. You know, you can start all over again. Your whole identity, you know, that place of ego is transformed, and you can embrace something completely new, a new positive and cleansed and revitalized way of being. I also like to think about that, you know, although this is sort of a transformation, it's a very organic change, so it's generally not sudden out of the blue in this essence. You know, part of you, your unconscious, has been very aware and working on this process, and knows that it is coming, and the more you embrace it, the more it becomes fluid and flows through. So, you know, this card in a reading can also indicate that maybe you are hanging on to something that's not serving you, that maybe some sort of unhealthy attachment to something, or your focus has become kind of out of balance, and it's reminding you of that. So this sort of pops up, depending on what cards it's next to, is going to give you a clear indication of that, and also what spread you do, where it appears in the reading. The other thing about this card, as I said, it's number 13. And remember, 13 again is a 3 and 1 is 4, which is that significance to the Emperor, which is why the Emperor is here, because the Emperor is 4. It's also a 22, which is represented by the Fool. You know, the Fool is the 22 and the 0. So again, so that's sort of talking about, it's like the structure changes, and through that change, that, you know, comes the Fool, which is life force, which brings this new life force, brings about new creative energy, and then that Emperor uses that new creative energy to build something new. You know, so it's that constant, you know, evolution of change. You know, that things die away, something new is born, that is created into something which will actually come to an end. There's always an end, and then something new comes again. So that's what's happening here. So some of the questions I think of when I see it in a reading is, you know, perhaps it's looking at what is my role, what in my life is ending, what do I need to let go of, perhaps what is being taken from me, what am I needing to let go of, as I said, what has been in the past. Perhaps it's a time to evaluate the past, and then what's true for me from that evaluation of the past, acknowledging the importance of embracing change, embracing transition and transformation, the role the ego and ego identification plays in our life, and the periods of our life where that changes, you know, and you know, leaving high school, there's a period of that sort of change, and as I said, becoming a parent, and, you know, moving into a new career, or leaving a career, retiring, all those elements of life is sort of represented here. It's that those shifts in personal ego identification are changing. So I hope that you have found this useful, and can perhaps yourself, if you have found this card one that you have feared or stressed about, if you got in a reading, maybe this will give you a little bit new insight to see that it's about wonderful opportunities and chances for new beginnings. If you'd like to have a reading with me, please catch me on my website, which is kirawoods.com. Please join my Facebook page, follow me so that you can get updates, send me any messages there or on Twitter. Please share this video with your friends and families and anyone you think might be interested, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. So thanks very much. I look forward to catching up with you with my next video. All the best.